Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining me for another inner hour. I'm going to do my little candle lighting here to give myself a moment to focus and invite you to do that in whatever way you like, wherever you are at the moment. So there's my little candle. Thanks to my wife. So we're continuing our series on what I'm calling Great Souls from History. And tonight we're going to be doing Pythagoras, which I will warn you ahead of time is I'm a big fan of Pythagoras. So we might do two sessions on him. We might not. We'll just see what kind of response there is. And just fascinating guy and contributed so much in many, many different fields of study. So we'll talk about that tonight. Basically, kind of a summation of his philosophy, a summation of his impact on music, and his ethical, moral code. But his life is a huge study in itself. And I hope if you don't know much about him, you get interested from tonight and not and not bored. But anyway, so it may just be one evening. We'll see how this goes. And in honor of Pythagoras, if you've ever heard music of the spheres, that phrase, the music of the spheres, that's Pythagoras. He came up with that. So in honor of that, um, I'm going to flip this on for a second. So here we go, music of the spheres. Uh, I won't leave this on the whole time, but I like playing with backgrounds, and I thought this was a good Pythagorean background. Uh, so first of all, Pythagoras was a Greek philosopher and had an academy in Greece that he opened. He lived, again, this is so far back that historians argue about exactly when all this occurred. He lived somewhere between 580 BC and 490 BC, somewhere in there. Then shortly after him came the sequence of Socrates, then immediately Plato, and then immediately Aristotle. So this was a really prime time in Greek philosophical development, and Pythagoras, and then particularly Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and some of the others who came after them in that line um, formed the basis of what's now called classical philosophy. If you study philosophy at any university level and study the classics or classical philosophy, the foundation of all that is Greek philosophy based on this era. Again, this is all roughly 500-ish years before Jesus was born. So to kind of put that in a time context for you. Um, so let me give you kind of a quick, again, you're welcome to interrupt, not interrupt, but you're welcome to interact at any time, you know, just by turning your mic on, your camera on, whatever, getting my attention, putting your hand up. I will also have particular pauses where I specifically invite that, but you're welcome to do that anytime you like. So this is kind of a quick summary of some things that people associate with Pythagoras. First of all, Pythagoras believed that the foundation of creation was number and that everything was built on numbers. So a quick, I'll get into more of the math, not too detailed, because I know my wife, for one, will zone out with that. But I will get into more of the math in a little bit. But specifically, that he believed that when he said number, he does mean integers, but he doesn't just mean that. He means vibration, and that every number had a particular vibratory essence to it, which could be perceived as a light or sound also. And that the foundation of numbers upon which this physical creation at least was built were zeros and ones. This was long, long, long before the first computer, which, if you remember back in those days, was a binary system and everything had to be key punched, and it was all zeros and ones. Every word, everything was a combination of zeros and ones. which is exactly what Pythagoras said, and that became the foundation of the computer system, which became the foundation of everything we have on the internet and computer and cell phones and all of that now. Uh, Probably his most famous mathematical contribution was what we now call the Pythagorean theorem, which is if you have a, uh, a triangle that you have a squared plus b squared equals c squared, the side A and side B, the length of those squared equals the length of equals this diagonal length squared, which again was a foundational thing in mathematics. As I said before, he also developed the term music of the spheres, and he did a great deal with music, which we'll get into a little bit more. But music and harmony was very, very important to him. The the music of the spheres idea essentially was that all things that live vibrate, or what he called sing, and they all radiate this vibrational uh, frequency out into creation based on the essence of what they are, that they radiate what they are, and that what they are vibrates out into all the universe, and that it can be heard by people with the ability to do that, and that the planet itself, Earth, and all the planets and all the stars for that matter, are alive. They're not dead bodies, and that which was a radical idea back in his day, and that all of them basically sing, and that there is a harmony in our planetary system, that Mercury, Venus, Mars, all of our planets sing in that sense, and that there's a song, if you will, or a harmony amongst them because of the order in which they're placed and the frequency of vibrations and how those vibrations interplay with one another. That order that he perceived in the universe, he's the first one that named that, and he named it in Greek because he was a Greek, and the word for that order was cosmos. So if you've ever used or heard the term cosmic or cosmos, that's Pythagoras. He put that together, and it basically means order. And he said the entire universe was cosmos, was order. There was a structure to it and a purpose to it and a design to it. So that was all Pythagoras, which again was not being taught in his era. Whether that was taught in the very, very, very ancient days, like in the days of the Veda, a long, long time ago, we don't really know, but certainly in recorded history, this was the first notion of that, particularly in the Western cultures. He also taught that there was such a thing as a soul and a body, and that while the body died, the soul didn't. The soul was immortal and went on to other life experiences after this one, and also prior to this one. And that he believed in reincarnation. He taught reincarnation, which he called transmigration of the soul. So the other two key components of what he taught basically were simplicity. He believed that it was very important to live as simply as possible and to teach as simply as possible. And the other aspect of that was self-discipline. He was really, really, really big on self-discipline, whether you call that self-mastery or responsibility, whatever you call it. That was huge in Pythagorean circles. As far as and also we'll get maybe, well, as I say, we'll get more into his ethics. But another thing was Pythagoras was vegetarian and strongly advocated that all his students be vegetarian. Uh, he believed that um, it was there was a negative consequence to eating animals, that it affected your bloodstream and health by taking the animal's blood and tissue into your body, and that basically by this is kind of an exaggeration, but he was pretty blunt in many ways about things, that basically eating death creates more death in your own body. So if you're eating dead things, um, that's not doing your body any favors. The the um, very strongly believed in pursuing knowledge and continuing to learn. So I want to mention about harmony for a second, and I want to mention about his academy before we get into the more specifics. Harmony was really, he believed that the whole, as I said, cosmos was structured in a harmonious way, and that harmony enhanced life, enhanced consciousness, enhanced health, enhanced social and cultural relationships, and that disharmony or discord damaged health, damaged consciousness, damaged relationships, damaged cultures, and so on. Uh, he had a really interesting way of teaching. He had many ways of teaching, but he had an interesting way of teaching harmony. When he was working with he had disciples. People don't think of it that way, but he did. Socrates had disciples, Plato had disciples. Um, Disciples was not just a function of Jesus in the New Testament. Rabbis had disciples. And so his he mostly taught in private at this school he set up in Greece. And I'll come back to that. But the way he taught harmony was he would draw a circle, and he would say, this is, he called it the monad, meaning one or singular. This is the oneness. There's just one. There's just this. And he drew a circle. This is one. This is one. This is the oneness. And then he said, this is the spiritual creation, the pure creation, the creation of light. Then vertically, so if you have a circle, he drew a circle underneath that. So you have a circle under a circle. And they were not quite touching. There's a little gap between them. So there's this spiritual creation of light that might be called in Jewish Christian terms the heavens. And then this lower creation or lower circle, which was the lower creation, which was a time space three-dimensional creation of limitation in which everything had a beginning, a duration, and an end, versus the spiritual realms, which everything was perpetual. Nothing came to an end. It was always. Uh, and that these two aspects of, and so the one by itself was monad, and the second, when you now have two, was called the what was the phrase that he said? I want to say duo, but he had a phrase for it. Yeah, I get, let me see. Not that you really care. It was duet, yeah, duet. So those two, and they were distinct from one another. And so the way he taught harmony was that you have this upper creation and this lower creation, if you will, the spiritual and the material, or represented as the soul and body at an individual level. And that harmony was, and then after he had the circle above and then the circle beneath, then he drew one large circle over the top of the topmost circle and underneath the bottom of the bottommost circle, so that both these top and bottom circles were contained within one circle, that third circle. And that third circle was harmony. And that's what made everything work that was actually dualistic or polarized, was the harmony. That's what made those work together. He also taught that if you had two divergent ideas and they both seemed true, but they seemed contradictory, that what you needed to do is keep searching for the third, the idea that would harmonize both of those and make sense out of both of those that were apparently true and also apparently in opposition. There was a third understanding that would make sense of both of those. And then he demonstrated that in music, which we'll get to in a moment. Uh, I want to tell you about his school, and I want to tell you about how you can find out more about him if you are interested. The school he had in Greece, he ended up leaving and moving out of Greece. He made a number of enemies there. because his teachings were quite radical in many different areas, in science and in what became music, in philosophy. Oh, philosophy is another one, by the way. If you've ever used the word philosophy or philosopher, first usage of that we know of in the Western world was Pythagoras. He coined the term. It's also Greek, philosophos. Um, and philo means lover, and sophos means wisdom. So philosophos or philosophy was the love of wisdom. A philosopher was a lover of wisdom. So again, that's Pythagoras. Um, and there's a story. The history of this is really unclear, but there's a long-standing story that he had a very, he only accepted private students and he interviewed them and they had a year long and some indications maybe it was a 2 year long initiate period where they were kind of on probation at his school. And if they lived up to his standards, then they were accepted as a full-time student or disciple. If they didn't, then they were expelled. They weren't allowed to continue into the higher studies. And you could not buy your way into the school. The school was on what he considered your merits and your existing knowledge and your willingness to learn uh, and your motivation. So he decided who came into the school and who didn't. There's a story that there's a very wealthy king, might be too strong a word, a regional ruler, because these are city states back then, a very strong, wealthy figure with a lot of power. And his son wanted to be part of Pythagoras' school. And there's another story about that and what happened when the son arrived, expecting special treatment and so on. But but it became clear to Pythagoras that this young man was in it for all the wrong reasons and wanted just power and was in it for egotistical reasons and to gain more power over others by learning this arcane or mystical or secret knowledge. And so Pythagoras would not accept him as a student, and the young man got very angry. There were already other citizens angry because what Pythagoras was teaching was not really going along with the Greek worships of God and goddesses in what was their traditional ways at the time. So they felt like he was kind of undermining their religion and causing problems with the youth. Same charge against Socrates many years later. So anyway, he ended up leaving Greece and he went to a small area called Crotona in Italy and set up his what became his most famous and enduring school in Crotona, Italy, and taught there for many, many years. And of course, had many Greeks, and then at that point had many Romans as well, or Italians who were part of his school. And his school is not limited to any particular race or ethnic group or nationality or anything like that. So that was rather unusual for the time as well. And then again, what we know is that he died tragically, and there are a number of stories about how he died, and that after he died, no one continued his work, and the academy did not continue. The story is that there was a young man who was very upset with Pythagoras. It may or may not have been the son of this wealthy person from Greece. Again, this is a very old story, so all fragmented. But the story is that there was a man named Cylon who was an opponent or angry with Pythagoras, and after doing his best to ruin his reputation and dissuade people from studying with him, that didn't work. He ended up with a band of people, and they came in actually one night and burned the entire academy to the ground and killed several people, including Pythagoras. So whether that's true, exactly how it happened, who was involved, we don't know. The legend does say that the young man's name was Cylon, Cylon, which for those of you who may remember Battlestar Galactica, you might remember the name of the enemy there. They were the Cylons, same name. So I found that interesting when that show came on. Uh, and as far as finding out more about him, there's a lot,
Hey,
of course,
hey,
mathematically. Oh
Stephen,
yeah, yeah. Go ahead,
did you
Liz.
Did you switch from Socrates to Pythagoras and I missed it?
Nope, I'm still on Pythagoras.
Oh, you never were on Socrates?
Never was. I just mentioned him that he had the same charge brought against him of subverting the youth that Pythagoras did in Greece. But
I
no.
gotta quit drinking my breakfast. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. So we're still on Pythagoras. And the mathematically, there's a lot known about Pythagoras. You can take, study many, many, many of his mathematical principles that are still used. But as far as his kind of philosophy, he actually wrote something that exists still. Again, kind of fragmented, but portions of it exist. It's called the Golden Verses. And the Golden Verses are, if any of you are familiar with the Gospel of Thomas, which is a collection of Jesus sayings, it's like that. There are no stories, no miracles, no chronology of anything. It's just a set of a sequence of sayings or aphorisms or teachings, very short. And it's called the Golden Verses. I'll share a few of them with you in a little bit. The it is available. There's an online source called forgottenbooks.com. If you're not familiar with that, they have a lot of arcane and esoteric books that are very hard to find, or ancient documents that um, they've posted that are available to look at. And the Golden Verses is one of them. There's a lot, their particular version has a lot of commentary, which you may or may not find valuable. But the part that Pythagoras wrote, the verses themselves, is clearly identified within it. And you can just look at that part if you want. There's 71 verses, I believe, in that. So, okay, so that's kind of an overview of some of that. I want to talk a little bit for a few minutes about his some of his number concepts and a few minutes about some of his musical things. So, first of all, he developed something that's called the tetractys in Greece, which basically means quaternary or four. And what it was is a pyramid of dots. And let me see if I can do this. Hang on a second. Do, do, do. I'm going to see if you can see this. Right, here it is. I don't know if that works. I don't know if you can see this or not, but this is this is what I'm talking about. There's a one dot here, then beneath it two, then beneath it three, then beneath it four. So altogether, there's 10 dots here. And he has names for all of them. He has qualities for all of them. So it's kind of a pyramid shape of one dot, two dots, three dots, four dots. Okay. So that tetractys is the basis of a lot of things. First of all, if you take the first one, which is one, and you add one plus the next line two, plus the next line three, plus the next line four, you get 10. So one plus two plus three plus four is 10. And he believed that 10, the base 10 number system was the basis of everything in creation. Um, the base 9 number system had been used largely before that. Ancient Egypt was an exception, but so he used the base 10 number system. And there are multiple uh, mathematical things in this formula that I won't go into that you can discover. One thing that is kind of interesting was he taught that he taught about atoms and molecules and as building blocks of this creation. And he taught that if you arranged atoms in a particular geometric shape, that you could unleash the power within them. Now, that was a nice kind of philosophical saying, and it didn't really mean much to anything until the atomic age, and they had trouble um, getting a trigger system to work reliably on what became a nuclear weapon because it was unstable. The mechanisms they came up with were unstable enough that it could go off when you didn't want it to, which would be really bad. And and if it were free falling, like from an airplane, you wanted it triggered actually above ground level and not when it hit the ground like a normal bomb. There are a lot of these complications involved with it, which are all quite unpleasant to contemplate. But the way that was eventually solved, as I understand it, and I'm not a physicist, is that they ended up arranging some of the elements, the uranium and other elements, in the radioactive elements in the bomb. They arranged them in a certain geometric pile. And once it was in that pile, it began to collapse and cascade upon itself, and that set off the chemical reaction that then triggered the actual mechanism of the nuclear explosion. So I found that to be an interesting connection to some of what Pythagoras taught. He he basically also said that 10 was a number of completion, that it was a perfect number because it was 1 and 0. So we're back to 1 and 0 again. And in the beginning, you had 0 and 1, and now you have 1 and 0. So it's the complete fulfillment of things. And so he taught about 10-year cycles and 10 stages of things and all of that sort of stuff. Musically, I'll only go a few more minutes. We'll open it up. Musically, for those of you who like music, Western music at least, the basis of all Western music, all of it, classical, rock, punk, grunge, hip hop, rap. I don't know about rap, but all seriously, I'm not a rap fan, but all Western music, the foundation of that is what's called the diatonic scale. It's a scale consisting of 7 distinct notes, and there's a particular pattern between those notes, which there's 5 whole steps in the sequence and 2 half steps in the sequence. The half steps occurring between the 3rd and 4th notes and between the 7th and 8th notes. And if you do that, if you start on any given note, pick any pitch at all, let's just say C. I know a lot of you aren't musicians, you won't know this, but if you start on any particular pitch and you go a whole step up and then another whole step up and then a half step up, then another whole step, then another whole step, then a half step, you end up with what's called the major scale. Do, re, mi, fa, sol, la, ti, do. That is a diatonic scale. That's the major scale. Pythagoras did that. Pythagoras is the one that put those relationships together and said, we can create instrumentation that uses these in ways that create beautiful harmonies. So all of the other things, the 3 different minor modes in music, the various Lydian and Mixolydian, Phrygian modes, all these different scale combinations in music, all grew out of this diatonic scale, which Pythagoras is the first one that really described that. And he described it in terms of math. If you take a string, let's imagine a guitar string for a moment. And so I have a guitar, and one end of the string is anchored down here at the bridge. Then there's the string. Then there's the other end of the string that crosses over a bar called a nut, and then is tightened with these tuners up here. So the string vibrates from the nut down to the bridge down here. That's the length of the string. And whatever you tune it to, let's say that you tune it to an A, for example. So when that string's vibrating, it's vibrating at 440 cycles per second. It's an A. If you divide that exactly in half, you get an octave. You get another A, but exactly double the frequency. So instead of at 440 cycles per second, it's at 880 cycles per second, and so on, up or down. If you lengthen the string by 2, you lower it an octave. If you shorten the string in half, you double it and make it a higher octave. So that relationship is an octave mathematically. And if you then cut that in half, you get a fifth. So those of you who are musicians, some of this will sound familiar. Musicians talk about intervals all the time. Thirds, fifths, and eighths are the primary structure of chords. If you have a single note, it's a single note. If you want a chord, you have 3 tones at least, and those 3 tones are primarily the first, third, and fifth notes of the scale I just said, the major scale. If you play the first, third, and fifth note, first, third, and fifth note and 8th note of that scale, 1, 3, 5, 8, you have the basis of your chord structure, and then you can invert those in any sequence you want, keep repeating 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5, 1, 3, 5, 8. You get chords. So it's the basis of everything. And Pythagoras was the first one that put that understanding in frequency and mathematical relationship. Then you have a different division for thirds and a different for fourths and so on. And there's a whole thing of harmonic overtones. And it's really, I find very fascinating, but then I am a musician or kind of, and and so I find that stuff really interesting. Some people probably find it boring to tears, but if you are a musician, it's really, really useful. And music theory grew out of the understanding of those relationships and how to make certain tones and sounds with those relationships, and that certain sounds affected our psyche. Certain sounds are considered very pleasing and uplifting. Others are considered very discordant and disruptive and disturbing. And some are considered very kind of melancholy or sad, and some are considered very bright and happy. And all of it has to do with the interval relationships and the relationship between two or three or four notes being played simultaneously, and then what timbre, what quality of sound comes out of that, and how that affects our emotions. So, music theory and music therapy really owe everything to Pythagoras and his research on all that. So, now Eastern music is a bit different because they're not based on half tone, they're based on quarter tone or smaller intervals. So, it's a little bit different, but all Western music is based on that. All right, here's the last little piece before I open it up. This is a series. This is from the Golden Verses, and these are just a number of his quotes. I'm going to select several of them. They're all short. So one, to live, meaning to live and not die, to live is not in our power, but to live rightly is. Um, Whatever you honor above everything else, that which you so honor has dominion over you. Consider all time lost in which you did not think of divinity. Here's what will sound very familiar to most of us because it's in Buddhism, Hinduism, Judaism, Christianity, you name it. That which you wish your neighbor to be to you, be that to your neighbor. Sound familiar? Golden rule in yet another form. Before you do anything, think of God, that his light may precede your energy into your action. Ask God only for those things that are worthy of God to bestow. I find that an interesting one. It is not death, but a bad life that damages the soul. Here's one I just have to throw in because I think this is, I don't know, I think it's good. Pythagoras was married and had children, and a long, long marriage until he was killed. And his wife worked with him, actually. She didn't, to my knowledge, she didn't teach as such. That might not be right, but I don't believe she did. But she was very, very supportive. She helped organize things. She did a lot of administrative work. She kind of kept him on task. She was very involved with him. And I've forgotten her name. I'm sorry. I forgot her name. We do know her name. I just can't remember it. So here's kind of a tongue-in-cheek, I think, quote from Pythagoras. Because a number of groups at that time were beginning to practice one form or another of celibacy for different reasons. Pythagoras did not advocate that, did not practice it, but the question came up sometimes. And so this was probably an answer to one of those questions. And he said, yes, you may refuse matrimony in order to focus on living incessantly in the presence of God. However, if you know how to fight and you're willing to, take a wife and have children. So I thought that was kind of fun. I'll just give you a few more. Any true assertion about God is a direct assertion from God. That's an interesting one. And the last one, which I actually, you wouldn't know this maybe from listening to me. I know I go on and on, but I think there is something to this when you're teaching to try to convey a particular teaching or concept. Using too many words in speaking about God obscures the subject. So I've certainly probably been guilty of that, and I've certainly seen lots of people who do that. So I'm going to pause there. I'm also going to get rid of my cosmic little background here. And if anybody has anything you'd like to ask or comment on so far, um, please do. I'm going to take a sip of tea here. Anna, I saw you first, and then James.
Yes, I had a few questions. Did Pythagoras initiate in the path of sound and light?
Um, according to certain teachers, yes, he absolutely did, and according to me, um, yes, but with a caveat of not in the way he's presented as doing that sometimes. Um, for those of you who aren't familiar with it, there's a set of spiritual teachings out of northwestern India in the Punjab region. Punjabi is the language uh, that are called light and sound teachings or the light and sound path, and there are many of them. There's a number of organizations in the West that teach that, and they all grew out of an Eastern teaching called Sant Mat, or the Path of the Saints. And again, from Punjabi, it's a relatively, the actual teachings as we have them now are relatively new historically, but there are remnants of it and indications of that go as far back as we can go. And in the West, at least, I've not heard this from the Eastern teachers, but in the West, at least, I know of at least three groups that teach, they pick certain souls out of the past, like Pythagoras and others, Jesus, Pythagoras, different people that they pick out of the past, and say that these people were sound and light teachers and initiated people. The initiation meaning they teach you a particular meditation practice that helps you to focus on this divine current, this sound and light current that moves within us and through us, and that by awakening, by learning how to focus on that current, we begin to spiritually ascend and awaken into higher spiritual realms. That's kind of in a real simple version what the sound and light teaching is about. And I know three different groups in the West that specifically pick people out of the past, like Pythagoras, who are famous, and say this person was a sound and light teacher. And I, the sound and light teachings in those eras were very, very, very secretive. They were not on the internet like they are now. They were not public like they are now. You had to go through at least a 2-year novitiate period on almost all of them, vegetarianism on almost all of them, no sex outside of marriage on almost all of them. They had all kinds of rules, and it was a very secretive thing back in those days. I there's no documentation that I'm aware of that indicates any of the people that are claimed to have done that did it, but there probably wouldn't be because they would have done it in private. So one of the questions is how do you know that? And maybe that's a soul memory thing.
Mhm.
And if you put stock in that, which I do actually, then maybe that's how they know. But I think there is a tendency among human beings, including spiritual teachers, to try to bolster our position by using stuff like I'll use a text from the Bible to support what I believe. I won't use the text from the Bible that don't support that. I'll only use the ones that do support it. Or I'll pick somebody out of the past and say, see, that he was teaching what I'm teaching. And so I'm not saying it's not true, but I think that I do positively because of Pythagoras's work with sound and particularly sound, but sound and light. I'm quite sure he taught meditative and contemplative practices that could be considered in alignment with that. But if we think of him as we would now, a sound and light initiating teacher, I think that's probably misleading. I don't think it was structured then like it is now. But, that was 500 and some years BC, so what do I know? But I think his teachings are very consistent with a lot of that. With, again, the spiritual realm, the material realm, um, and so on. I think there's a lot of consistency there. And I think it would be fair to say he was in alignment with a lot of that. Um, I There's another thing that happens with spiritual teachings sometimes, whether it's fundamentalist Christians or whether it's gurus. There's an exclusivity to many of them that it's like, well, my in India, my guru is better than your guru is not a joke. It's a real serious thing, and there's a lot of that in spiritual organizations where there are organizations that say, well, we're the master, and so we're the ones that can get you there. Don't study with somebody else. And um, Pythagoras never did that. Neither did Socrates or Plato. They all encourage learning and studying as much as possible. So when we put him in that category, it's easy, I think, to get some mistaken notions about him. If we're just talking philosophically and the idea of working in our consciousness with aspects of light and sound for greater understanding, then absolutely, I think that's true. So
So he was earlier than Judaism and Christianity, correct?
he was earlier than Christianity, not earlier than Judaism. Judaism is way older than Pythagoras, and Judaism and Hinduism are the two oldest existing religions that we can, to my knowledge, that we can demonstrate the age of them from documentation. They're
We
very
don't
old.
really know what his spiritual practice was.
We don't specifically. No. Again, there's a lot of groups that say they do because it's like, well, see, he taught what we're teaching. Well, maybe, but we don't really know. Like, what was his meditation practice? We don't know. What was, did he have particular prayers he did? We don't know. What we do know is that, like many other mystics, they supported the traditions of their time and culture. They were not trying to get people to not do those. So, like Kabir, who's a famous mystic in India, was a Hindu all his life and practiced Hinduism and worshipped at Hindu temples like a regular fundamentalist Hindu. But he wasn't a regular fundamentalist Hindu. He was a profound mystic. And so mystics think of him as a mystic, but he participated in Hinduism all his life. Some of the great Sufi masters participated in traditional fundamental Islamic devotions their whole life. Jesus and his apostles participated in Jewish practices, traditional Jewish practices, their entire life. And um, so Pythagoras did advocate worshiping at Delphi, worshiping, doing the things that people in his regions did. He didn't discourage that. He was just trying to say there's more to life than this. But
Mhm.
you know, that doesn't mean you have to turn away from this. Or one of the Sant Mat teachings, I mentioned that as a group earlier. One of the Sant Mat teachings, which is an inner mystical light and sound path, one of their things that's consistently in their literature and taught by their masters is if you want to become a satsangi, a practitioner of Sant Mat, that should make you, that should not make you walk away from your other faith. That should make you a better Jew if you're a Jew. If you're a Christian, Sant Mat practice should make you a better Christian. If you're a Hindu, Sant Mat practice should make you a better Hindu. So it's something that's done internally, and it does not have to be in conflict with an outer observances in your family or culture.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, my last question has to do about numerology. I know numerology 9 is the complete number.
Mm-hmm.
Did numerology as a practice come out of Pythagorean theory, or is it just kind of?
Yes, one form of numerology definitely did. What they now people call Pythagorean numerology did come out of that. Yes, there's a lot of occult influence in that that was not in Pythagoras's original stuff. But yes, and he talks a lot about the nine numbers. Um, the and in what's now represented as numerology, nine is considered like the completion, but
Mm-hmm.
10 in those systems is considered a new beginning,
Mm-hmm.
meaning that you've now completed something, so you're moving into the next level or next phase of it. And so, yeah, there is a relationship between that for sure, but he didn't do numerology in the way that you and I might do numerology now. He didn't do that. The
Okay.
At least again, to the best of my knowledge and the best of documentation, who knows what any of these people did that weren't written about and we don't know, but I don't think so. I don't think he did it in that form. And then there's gematria, which is a Hebrew numerology. Actually, there's three forms of Hebrew numerology, but
Oh,
gematria is the most widely practiced. And basically, the Hebrew gematria is very different than so-called Pythagorean numerology. It Because Hebrew numbers are also there are no Hebrew numerals, none. So the Hebrew letters are literally also Hebrew numbers. So the letter Aleph is a letter Aleph. It is also literally the number one. It's how you write one in Hebrew. So the gematria in Hebrew is primarily focused on looking at mathematical relationships between words and saying if this has a certain mathematical relationship in relation to this word, then there is a meaning relationship between this word and this word, even if it doesn't seem like it when you just look at the word. So there's a whole study of scripture that's mathematically based as opposed to conceptually based. So
oh,
then there's an Eastern numerology, a Chinese numerology that I know next to nothing about, that's not based on Pythagoras or gematria. So there are
that's all
several
very
systems.
fascinating.
It is, isn't it? Yeah.
Oh, it's very fascinating. Thank you.
Yeah, to me it is. I know some people are just like yawning and ordering a pizza or something. But anyway, yeah. James, go ahead.
Yeah, actually, my question is kind of related to what Anna was asking about. When Pythagoras, and then I know Plato, and then Plato was speaking on behalf of Socrates, they would address things to God. You have to do this to God, and so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And in the English, as I remember this from my poli sci courses at IU,
Mhm.
in English it literally is translated into God.
Yeah,
So
but
my question is, which God is he talking about?
yeah, but
Because
it's not the God we're thinking of, right?
yeah, because it doesn't make sense because it's like I don't think it's Zeus really, because believe me,
Mm-mm.
Zeus was not that kind of god.
No, this was not that kind of God. Jupiter wasn't either. No, no, they're not.
Yeah, I mean, is this a mistranslation through 15 different
Yeah, I actually
languages
think
or what?
that's a great question. I actually think it is. And for example, there's another word in classical philosophy, as you would know. Socrates talks a lot about the demons. And when
Mm,
people now hear that, they're thinking satanic demons, like the
mhm.
fallen angel. That's not at all what he was talking about.
Yeah.
Daimon, in Greek was meaning one of the higher forms of life, one of the gods or goddesses. And it had nothing to do with good or evil, which
Yeah.
the sound of that word now makes a lot of contemporary, especially Christians, think, ooh, these are bad guys. Uh,
Mhm.
and so to me, I think the idea in the Greek philosophers was not the what we probably in the Judeo-Christian milieu think of as the one God or a creator God. It was a multiplicity of actual beings or a multiplicity of forces. Like Plato talked, for example, about the noumenal and phenomenal worlds. So in the phenomenal world, you had reflections of beauty. In the noumenal world, you had pure beauty, actual beauty. It was a thing, and or you had truth as an actually something. It's truth. And down here you have kind of aspects of truth or reflections of truth or partial truths.
Yeah, but there's no pure truth.
But
Like
exactly.
Fortuna and things like that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think it's more likely they were talking about those kind of virtues or higher order of things that they didn't well define. Sometimes they talked about them as gods or goddesses. Sometimes they talked about them as virtues, because I don't think they were well defined, and I don't think they're easy to talk about. Even today, it's when we start talking about metaphysical stuff, you have a lot of language problems, you know.
Yeah.
So
Well, especially because Greek paganism was so much transactional.
very transactional.
It's like, well, I need a raise or I need this or I need that. Let's go sacrifice a chicken down. I mean,
Right, right.
Socrates literally made a joke about that as he died.
As he was dying, yes, I know.
Yeah,
Yeah,
and
one of the very last things he said, actually. Yeah.
yes, and it's like every time I hear that, I don't understand who that God is that they're talking about. I don't know. Maybe he was in the Eleusinian mysteries or Eleusinian mysteries or whatever they call
That's my particular take on it. I think he was. But again, that's not something that's well known to too many people over here unless they've studied it.
it. Mhm.
And so the references would be kind of obscure at best. But I think so. I think there were mystery schools in Greece, and
Mhm.
they taught there were the Eleusinian mysteries, there were Dionysian mysteries. I mean, there were all these different takes on things, and they all involve some kind of sacrifice and or some kind of ritual and or some kind of meditation or prayer practice. Um, and so we don't, part of the problem is, again, documentation. We have kind of fragmented references to these things, and it's really hard to know exactly how they looked at some of that. But it's pretty certain that they weren't thinking of kind of a personal creator God in the way that maybe Jewish Christian theology would look at it, you know. So
Okay,
I
or
think,
that makes more sense. Thank you.
yeah,
I've
I
always
think that's a great question. I think if we can kind of think of it maybe in terms of like a divine versus
yes,
material or physical, that's probably
yeah,
more accurate than
something
God.
above.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, something above, right.
cool.
Right.
That makes sense. Thank you
Yeah.
very much.
Yeah, welcome.
Hey, hey, Stephen.
Yes,
Stephen,
yes.
I don't think James knows the little known rule, the ancient rule that if you come to class wearing a t-shirt, you have to tell us what it says. It has words on it.
Okay, we'll go back to James and then we're going to Nahama.
No, that comes from medieval German, actually. So this is
Tis
Monty
but
Python. I wore it for Shuli and Nahama. I had a choice today between this shirt and another shirt, and I chose this one because they mentioned it the last time I wore it. So there you go.
There
you're
you
gonna
go.
have to explain it to me. I can't see all of it.
Oh, tis but a scratch, the Monty Python Black Knight scene.
Right.
I'll have to
Yeah, she'll have to look it up. It's hilarious.
thank
It's
you. Thank
hilarious.
you. Thank you.
Shuli is a big movie buff. And if you want to know about movies or want to talk to somebody about movies, Shuli's great because yeah. And she and I at least have some very similar tastes in some of that stuff. But
And the play, Stephen, you're forgetting.
that's true. That's true. Yes. Yes.
Python and the Holy Grail.
Oh yeah. That's one of that if you've not
Christ.
seen Monty Python and the Holy Grail, and you are very, very attached to traditional um, Christian values, you might find it highly offensive. But if you're a little more open-minded, it's hysterical. The basic premise is that there's a young boy born in a stable basically next to where Jesus is born at the same time, and he's mistaken for the Messiah over and over again, and it's
That's
really
life.
funny. Yeah, Life of Brian. Yes, oh, yeah, yeah, that's right. And the Holy Grail is the one with the knights, and all of the Monty Python stuff is outrageously ridiculous and very clever, I think. But I have a weird sense of humor. So.
I highly recommend. But that's not what I was gonna say. But I had to do that.
All right,
Sorry.
go ahead, Noella.
What I found myself thinking about is we're talking about these people that we know in modern times as
Yeah,
as philosophers.
yeah,
And then we talk about Christianity and Judaism and the various traditions, Hinduism, whatever. Doesn't matter. And I think they were just different, and it didn't hit me until I studied with a friend who his PhD is in philosophy. So but he's talked about it from the head.
yep,
And I looked at it, I realized, no, these philosophers we're trying to do the same thing that the
Yeah.
other individuals were trying to do, and that was create a cosmology where the world made sense to
Sense.
them.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah,
Yep.
some of it is very metaphysical,
Right.
and some of it is very concrete. Some of it is pretty head oriented, some of it is heart. It's different parts of us, but ultimately, I think it's just many, many, many various ways of saying something very similar.
Oh, I do too. I do too.
Of
And while,
overlap.
yeah, absolutely. And even some of the famous scientists like Newton, in the pre-Einstein science era, that are primarily talked about in scientific terms, and they're scientists and they're trying to analyze and figure out everything. Yes. And Newton was trying to understand God and the creation and how things worked and to make sense of life. I mean, I think that's kind of the bottom line is whether it's religion or science or philosophy, at the original point of that is to try to figure out how do I make sense of all this? What's a picture that I can have that kind of, even Einstein trying to have the unified field theory, basically it's the big picture of how does everything fit? How does this work? And I think
Right.
that's what everybody's trying to find.
Yeah, and each of our brains work a little bit differently, and
Mhm.
our life experiences have shaped us differently. So
Mhm.
some of us use our head more and
Oh yeah.
want a structure of a certain kind, and other people, it's more metaphysical, and other people,
Right.
so it's
Mhm.
that. I told somebody once, I'm Jewish, and I said, God was pretty smart, there can only be one creator. God was smart, God knew the variety of humanity. So
Yeah,
there's so many different roads to get to God,
exactly.
so
Exactly.
many different paths. And so that's kind of how I look at it. It's just they're all different paths and sometimes one has spoken to me and other times a different one has spoken to me,
Yeah.
yet they fit
Yeah.
together.
Yeah, me too. Me too. I after my during my college years and several thereafter, I kind of left Western religions altogether. I mean, Judaism, Christian, everything. And because the forms of those that I was studying weren't giving me the answers that I wanted. I was studying what turned out to be very limited, kind of fundamentalist, literal. And it's like, that's not it. It wasn't speaking to me. So I went to the Eastern stuff and did all the consciousness stuff, the yoga things and the meditation things and Hinduism and Buddhism and all that. And I got a lot out of that. I mean, but like you said, at various times, there are different things we need. A friend
Yeah.
that I teach with here named Michael, that locally a lot of you know, Michael has told a story before about one of his teachers, a gentleman named Rabbi Brooks, that used to call, he lived in New York and Michael lived here in Fort Wayne. And
Oh,
and so Rabbi Brooks would call up Michael at any hour because he is an unusual rabbi. He reminded me in many ways of Shlomo, but he would call up Michael the phone would ring at midnight and Michael pick it up and be Rabbi Brooks. And there'd be no introduction or explanation. Just say, Mikhail, why did God make one man a Hindu and another man a Buddhist and another man a Christian, another man a Muslim? And Michael's like trying to wake up and figure out this. He's like, I don't know, Rabbi. And he says, that's right, you don't. God does. You need to honor all of them. Good night. They would hang up.
yeah,
But he would have little
yeah,
tidbits like that. But it's like, this reminder of, yeah, there's a reason that things are structured the way they're structured. And really, if you think about it, if you pick a religion or a philosophy or a particular viewpoint on life that you're aware of that really doesn't work for you, that really is like, ugh, no, thank you. What if that was the only one? I mean, what if there were only that one? That'd be a mess. So thank God
yeah.
there's all these avenues, that we can find something that fits us to pursue. So,
Right. And if I go, oh, I have an answer for this particular aspect,
yeah.
it's I can get into it. If I go, I have the answer, I'm going to
Um,
have things bouncing against it
oh,
constantly.
constantly. Yeah, constantly.
The answer for
Right.
me.
Right.
There's just
And
There's such an amazing variety, and I speak to people with such deep wisdom. Yet, if you listen to this one, they're saying something that's not gonna
Uh-huh.
go with this person and what they're
Uh-huh.
saying.
Uh-huh.
Yet neither one of them are in disagreement, and they don't always
Mhm.
understand.
I know, I know. Yeah, it's so
Yeah.
true. And that's one of the things that's personally just hard for me is um, people getting so rigidly attached to it's just this, it's just this. And and basically by fixating on that, what you just said, you create an adversarial situation where everything else is not that, and therefore it's not okay and it's wrong, and you're always butting heads with things, and
One of that brings up one of the rules I create in the classes I facilitated
yeah.
at the synagogue. And that is when we're talking and having a discussion, please don't use the word but, use the
Mm-hmm.
word and,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
because that makes room for additional information instead of something that's almost aggressive.
Yes. I thought it was
This,
like exactly. I thought it was like this, but it's actually like this. No, I thought it was like this, and it's also like this. Yeah.
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, that's good.
thank
I would love to, yeah, I would love to do one of your classes sometime.
you have to call in, and they're Sunday morning. Sorry, Uncle
Yeah, I
Steve.
know, I know.
You're
That's
usually busy.
and there are so many throughout my life as a musician and then as a teacher, spiritual, whatever I am. They so many of my friends who were playing music that I wanted to go listen to, I was playing a different gig at the same time, or so many like David did this to me all the time. Coopers would always have a retreat when I was doing one. It's like, wait a minute, why are you doing it, right now? And so it was, and I
So
had so
that's,
many people that I'd want to go to their things and I can't because I'm doing something at the same time.
yeah,
Yeah.
Mm.
yeah. Thank
Anyway,
you.
thank you both.
Stephen, I'm interrupting again. Sorry. Hey,
Go
that
ahead,
was
Liz.
Rabbi who that talked to Michael? Michael?
Oh,
Rabbi?
yeah, Rabbi, he always called him Mikhail, which is Hebrew. Michael's, of
Yes.
course, the English version. Mikhail means literally who is like God.
I'm sorry.
And
Rabbi who?
Rabbi Brooks was his name.
Thank you.
Yeah, he lived in New York. He met Michael when he was here. He come into town to do some work for some, I don't know, remember who it was, but some Jewish group he came into town to work for. Michael met him, they hit it off, and Michael began studying with him. And then they had kind of a largely long distance relationship, but periodically we get together. He was a very influential teacher. Michael had many teachers, as we all have, and he was a very influential one. I never got to meet him. He's gone now, but
I may gently share this line with our family friends that keep trying to convert us to traditional Christianity.
hmm
I may gently say that, so we'll see.
yeah, sure.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks, Liz. So we're at that time again. It's 8 o'clock. So thank you all for being here tonight. I really appreciate it. Um, if you have any feedback so far on what we've done in this series that you'd be willing to email me, let me know if you're getting anything useful out of it or find it interesting. I'd appreciate it. Or have any people in particular you'd like me to touch on before we end the series. I do have a few more that I'd like to do. I'm not sure exactly. I've been kind of doing them chronologically, sort of. I'm not sure which ones I'm going to do yet. I do want to touch on Socrates and Plato because they're so influential in Western philosophy and ethics, both. Aristotle was as well, and also much more so in the science arena. Um, and I kind of want to try to touch on a few others, maybe Saint Francis and maybe the Baal Shem Tov also, because people don't tend to know a lot about either one of them, and they were very significant people as well. I mean, everybody's a significant person, but I mean, they made an impact on a long-lasting impact in certain arenas of spiritual teaching. So. Anyway, I will say goodnight for now. Thank you very much for joining me. Just take a moment with me if you would, and extend your blessings to all those in the world who are seeking by whatever path they're approaching it. And to ask that there be a spirit of greater understanding and greater kindness in our spiritual endeavors toward people who may be having a different endeavor than we are or looking at things differently than we do. And so may this be a week of blessing for all of us, and may it be a week where the world has more peace than it did last week. So for this, we thank you. Amen. Thank you all. I look forward to seeing you again. Oh, I forgot to announce, and this is important. I will not see you next week. Sorry. Next week is Mother's Day. We have some family things planned, so I will not be doing Inner Hour next week. Please do something that you enjoy and find spiritual uplifting instead of this at that time. And then the following Sunday again, we'll start up with continuing this series. So skipping next week. All right. Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you, Stephen and Ani.
Thanks, Liz. Mhm. Yeah, Ani's on our computer that doesn't have a camera, so she can't talk, but she sees you and hears you.
And let her know that we had a thunderstorm on Saturday morning and it woke me up in the middle of the night. First thing early
Okay.
for the thunderstorm, but not the wind.
Yeah. Well, hopefully you don't have any more of those at all this week.
We need the rain though.
The rain's good. So you can have rain without thunderstorms. So
I would
rain's
rather,
good.
And we have been in drought, so that's a good thing.
Yeah. There you go.
Yes.
I guess
Thanks,
sometimes,
Stephen.
yes. Hi, Allison. Was that you?
I was just saying thank you. I have I'm gonna say it in a little snarky way, but yeah, I actually mean something serious by it. But it's like, how many amazing teachers does God have to send to us
Yeah.
before we can wake up and listen?
Amen. Yeah, amen.
Well
Wonderful.
said.
I wish other people hadn't left quite yet. That was wonderfully said. Thank you, Allison.
Well, thanks. And thanks for letting me be just a little bit like, oh my gosh, people,
No,
wake up, wake up, wake up.
I get it. I do get it. And
I wish I was more awake, but at least I'm a little bit awake.
Absolutely.
That's good.
Absolutely.
Anyway, thank you.
You're in good company. You know, Jesus said the same thing. How many prophets does God have to send you?
Yeah, yes. Yes.
Right.
Oh.
So Stephen, was it those other people that are gone that really needed to hear it?
There's one to ponder this week.
I was thinking of people even way beyond that who really need to hear it.
Yeah.
I'm joking.
I'm with you. It's so nice to be connected with you again, Allison. I love it. So thank you for.
Oh, me too. I'm gonna come down to Fort Wayne one of these days for
Awesome.
something.
Awesome.
I am going. Yeah, I'm definitely gonna do that.
You get our email calendar every month now, right?
Well, I
no?
get the calendar, but I have to confess, I don't think I've looked at it because I know what time these are on
Yeah,
Sunday.
sure. Right.
So I will go look
But if you
at
ever are
something.
inclined to do something, that email calendar that comes out, if we do a live event like a potluck event or a class event or whatever, those are in there. All the details are in there. So,
Okay.
and then you can,
Okay.
of course, call me or text me or email me,
Yeah.
whatever. But if you any particular time think, oh, is there something going on I'd want to go down to this month? It'll be in that.
Yeah. And I'll see if my friend Diane wants to drive with me.
Oh, cool. Diane the Tucker Diane?
Yes, Diane the Tucker Diane.
Awesome.
Okay.
All right. Love you guys.
Talk to you later. Bye,
Bye-bye.
everybody.